Today's episode is juicy AF. Also a little bit vulnerable, as always. And we're talking about some really, really important things. As you can see from the title, it is called Confessions of a Fuckboy and Initiating the Masculine. So if you have not heard the episode before this, I highly recommend you go back and listen because that's kind of a precursor to this episode. Of course, this one will still make sense. However, it will make a lot more sense if you go back and listen to the episode before on embodying 2 profound soul lessons, choosing self, and trusting my intuition, because I talk about a profound experience that happened at a leadership event, and the experience, the healing, actually took place with Brett, who is on this episode, a beautiful, beautiful soul who is coming out about his story, which was kind of the opposite to my story, being on the receiving end of certain things. If you've heard the story of my real spiritual awakening, which, yes, we will get back to that very soon and get the next part out. I am taking a brief break because every time I tell pieces of that story, there's a lot of energy. It's a lot to process. And honestly, it's just been really busy with the business, which is so exciting, doing launches, and we have the retreat coming up this week. So I will get back to that story on the podcast very, very soon. And my dear mentor, we are pausing that recording as well, and I'll explain that in the next episode why. She requested that, and I'm totally honoring that. She will come on in divine timing. But in the episode after this one, I will explain why. So without further ado, we will get to the show. If anybody here is dealing with addiction or knows anybody who's dealing with addiction, any sort of addiction, honestly, I help heal the root cause of these. But specifically porn addictions with escorts, sex, any lust-based frequencies. There's so many layers to this. Healing the core trauma is the core of healing the root cause of that, so it doesn't manifest in another addiction. But then also clearing the DFs, if you know what those are, you know, and these etheric kind of entities, essentially. This is one of the things that I have mastered in this lifetime. I didn't plan on it, but, you know, my soul brought me to places and circumstances where I had to learn that. So please do not hesitate to reach out. I am taking on a few more private clients in this capacity. It is a 4-month container. It is deep work for those who are ready to actually heal the root cause of that and have the support in doing that. And then be a match to true sacred union, true honoring of the feminine, and call in a partner or repair a partnership with a queen, somebody who embodies that goddess energy. So there's things that make you a match to that, and none of these lust-based frequencies will be a match to that energy. So I really want to support a few more men in that, as well as any women who have been pulled to these types of dynamics, these manipulative dynamics, or, you know, had people cheat on them. There are certain energetic ingredients for people to fully honor you and fully be devoted to you. So this is the work that I do with women. And I've had several clients this past year become a match to this and are now engaged to their soulmates. One is already married and having a baby. So this work is not for the faint of heart. It is very deep, very profound, and reaps very profound rewards. So men and women, different opportunities there for you. We will link my information for my team's email. It is application-based below, and as well as my website. You can look at multiple testimonials on there. We have many more video ones on my YouTube channel, as well as my Instagram at Jillalannanixon or at Jillalannanixon testimonials, which we'll link below as well. Okay, without further ado, let's go to the show. Hi, loves. I'm Jillalannanixon, and I'm your host of the Soul Manifestation Podcast. The best way I can describe myself is as a manifestation mentor, a shamanic healing facilitator, and as a psychic intuitive. 5 years ago, I got pushed into my spiritual awakening and my third eye got blasted wide open. I genuinely thought I was a schizophrenic. Later learning it was clairvoyance. Through many initiations by my higher self, I have learned the skills to manifest and heal myself. Some examples include when I was told I'd go blind and I healed my eye with energy. When my dog got stolen and I manifested getting him back, which was literally a miracle. Listen to the podcast. When I manifested beating out 3,000 girls for a national commercial. I went from penny pinching and spending my allocated $25 a week on groceries, literally living off rice, beans, and peanut butter, to now building a multiple six-figure a year business serving clients all over the globe. I have now become the creator of my reality and the victor of my story, creating a life of love and luxury. And I'm here to teach you to do the same. I am not special in my ability to manifest. And I know this because I've shared these tools and understandings with clients all over the world to help them manifest things such as getting drafted to the NHL, manifesting sacred soulmate relationships, manifesting all expense paid for trips, building successful businesses, doing what they love, and expanding revenue from nearly filing for bankruptcy to manifesting up to $2,100 profit weeks. The evidence is that these tools actually work. Through all of these miracles and many more, I realized how powerful we are when we choose to be the victor and creator of our reality. And I want to teach you guys how to do it. The intention of this podcast is to give you deeper insight on how the spiritual, and I want to teach you guys how to do it. The intention of this podcast is to give you guys deeper insight on how the spiritual science of manifestation actually works, share where I see a lot of people get stuck in manifestation, and inspire you of what's possible for you too. I love you, and let's go to the show. Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to the Soul Manifestation Podcast. Today, we have a good friend, Brett, on the podcast. He is the one who I had that healing experience with from the last episode. If you haven't listened to it, I highly recommend, because you'll get a greater understanding of what we're talking about today. It was the episode on my 2 profound soul lessons, integrating them, following your own intuition. Otherwise, Brett and I wouldn't have met. And choosing yourself, which we'll talk about this, I have a feeling, in this episode in different ways. So if you haven't listened to that episode, please go back before you listen to this one. But in a nutshell, we met at a nervous system leadership somatic healing event. And a deep healing happened for me that I was unexpecting. With, you guys know the story of my ex. We're getting to the end of that. Those episodes will be out soon, but he took accountability for certain behaviors, which we're going to talk about today, not obviously to do with me because we had met at the event, but in his life. And that was so healing for me, because one thing my ex didn't do was take accountability. And I'm going to tell you later in the episode a distortion that I realized that actually prevented any past partners of mine from taking accountability for this. And the energetic that I believe was why you took accountability. but we'll get to that in a little bit. So, Brett, without further ado, would you like to introduce yourself, who you are?
I would love to. Thank you. Well, Jill, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It was such a pleasure and an honor to get to meet you and go
Mm.
through the experiences that we had together in Austin those past few weekends, or I guess past weekend. I was there for two and fortunate to have you there for the second one. So, my story in a nutshell is that I am a now happily married man with three children, two with my wife, one with a woman who I had a fairly brief relationship with in my 20s, and where we became estranged literally up until very recently. And so I've got a 17-year-old daughter who I've only just met 6 months ago. And if this is something that anyone else listening has experienced, I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to tell parts of this story from the perspective of, are we using the title that we were bouncing back and forth over email for this one?
Yes.
Okay, so as a former and now reformed fuckboy, um, this is me opening it all up. And I'm a little bit filled with nervous energy because this is my
Yeah.
first time talking in a public forum about any of this. I've had private
Yeah.
conversations with my wife and with my oldest daughter's mom, and like Jill, with yourself and some of the
Yeah.
folks who we spent time together. So I will say that I have I have businesses that I operate. I work in a consultative capacity with professionals, and I anticipate that I will get some questions from probably a few people once this gets its way around the internet. But I welcome it. I really am here in the spirit of openness and healing,
Yeah.
and I don't particularly feel as though I have to hold back. So
Yeah.
we're going to do this to the fullest of whatever the conversation leads us to.
Yeah. So, firstly, thank you again for coming. I know this conversation is so important. And for the audience, we were chatting a bit before we came on here, with the intention of not shaming these types of behaviors because it, and it's so ironic because I probably wouldn't have been able to do this episode if it was like before that healing situation. But
Wow.
now the resentment and the anger has literally dissolved. And that is the byproduct of somatic work, and trusting where your soul is guiding you. Because if I had listened, if you guys listened to the last episode, if I'd listened to anybody else, including my intuition teacher, including colleagues, including anybody else's perception, I wouldn't have met you. I wouldn't have had that healing experience. We wouldn't be here today having what I believe is a really important conversation, because there's a lot of, and it's not just men doing the behaviors that we'll talk about and women being, quote, I hate the word victim, but I'm going to say victims of it. It goes both ways. There's women doing similar behaviors, um, to also men who are kind of naive to understanding these energetics. But I don't want to shame anybody or anybody watching this episode. That is not the intention, because there's so many factors at play here, and we are going there. Um, these behaviors are driven through wounds, and dark forces will work through those wounds, and it's almost like these compulsions, like you don't have control of them. I have dealt with them in my own way. The outlet was different. I've worked with many people who have also dealt with them. So it's so easy to just judge, especially if you have been through personal experiences like this. I get it. But the intention of this episode is really to illuminate these patterns, these manipulation patterns, to men and women, probably more specifically women, because more women follow my podcast, so that you can identify them and then go do the healing that drew you to those energetics. Because, not blaming anybody here, but I know when I was in this type of energetic, um, with my ex, actually with every dude that I ever dated, it was just more hidden with my ex, and deceitful, but I was a magnet to that. So there was a wound in me, which we'll talk about, because wound is used against women or men, in order to manipulate them. And so the core healing is really, really the key here. And then also, like, on top of that, clearing dark forces. For those of you who don't know, well, if you listen to my podcast, you probably know, but they're literally basically entities that are trying to siphon energy to survive. And they'll do it often through the sexual energy because it's the most powerful. And so they'll work through people's wounds so that they can stay alive. So that is our intention. I'm really excited. I'm also nervous to have this conversation. Um, and I know it's going to help a lot of people because when I started telling my story, I didn't want to, and I didn't realize how many people it helped. It was shocking. So thank you for coming on here. Thank you for having this conversation. I think it's also going to help a lot of men who are doing similar behaviors, or even women who are doing similar behaviors, and men who have been on the other end of it. And for all y'all here, just so you know, I'm not like a saint. I've done a lot of healing, but I was a woman years ago who also used my sexual energy to manipulate in ways that now like are so cringe, and like it actually makes me sick thinking I used to do that. I talked about this in the story of my real awakening. So again, not to judge these things, but just to show you that if you do the deep healing, everything will shift. And if we have time today, maybe we'll talk about the sacredness of that sexual energy and why it is so potent and powerful, and give people kind of inspiration of when we start to cultivate it and we're in control instead of it being in control, because it's in the shadow and it's like fissured. There's a suppression there because the energy can't be destroyed. It can only be transmuted. And so when we disown a part of ourselves, including our sexuality, what happens is that energy is still there, but it will come out in a thwarted way. And this is why so many people in that event that we did, so many men had well, men and women had sexual trauma, but a lot of the men had issues with this, or porn, or like escorts, or just everything in that vein that comes from a deep wound and a lot of shame and the disowning of the sexual energy. And there is a massive distortion. Sorry, I'm talking a lot. There's a massive distortion right now in humanity saying the masculine energy is bad, it's dangerous. What's dangerous is the suppression of the masculine energy. A dude who has embraced that power, that anger. Like when we did the sacred rage practice and like all the men, I was like, I've never felt so safe in my life. Where are all these men in humanity? Like they just expressed all this anger. And I was like, oh my God, I'm safe. I'm safe in this environment because I know somebody tried to hurt me. Like they're going to fight back. So the suppression of anger, even that causes a lot of issues in society today. So again, not to be judged, but I think this conversation is really important. And so many people struggle with this, whether they're in so many veins. So thank you for being here.
Glad to be here. Yeah, I really got a lot out of that exercise you just referred to, that was the rage.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great segue into what we're talking about today, which is really men out of a place of need and weakness and deceit to try to get certain needs met or escape from things that they really might not know how to deal with in their life
Yeah.
by way of using women. I mean, that's really what
Yes.
I think this broken behavior is all about. And
Yeah.
for myself, even after I had moved on from that stage of my life and was being a faithful husband, I still didn't have a functional way of having emotions come out of my body,
Yeah.
including rage. And so
Yeah.
I think that is really probably a very overlooked thing with a lot of men. I grew up in an era where it was very frowned upon to
Yeah.
be crying or to be showing much emotion in any capacity that wasn't positive or helping get things done or being a good player on the team. And I had the remarkable experience to shed tears and to like fully cry for the first time. I'm gonna be 46 next month. That was the first time I had done that since I was like 10 years old. So that's a thing that I can't imagine I'm alone in. Maybe that's extreme,
Yeah.
but I think there are a lot of men who
Yeah.
are going through the same thing where they feel like it's not good to have any kind of emotional volatility or release, and certainly in front of other people. And B, after you adopt that mindset for a long enough period of time, I think it evolves into something of a complex or a
Yeah.
phobia almost, where I was terrified to cry in front of anyone. And
Yeah.
that's a thing that I didn't recognize the significance of it until only very recently. And I think it's no coincidence that you and I found each other in that room
Yeah.
as I was able to start to open my heart up and
Yeah.
to let these things out. And so,
Yeah.
so thank you for helping guide me in that direction, because I don't think I'd be here today if that hadn't happened.
Yeah. 100%. I don't believe in coincidences. I think that was a divine synchronicity, especially the part like, I mean, you look similar to my ex, like different, but there's a lot of similarities in certain ways. And I'm like cosmic joke, literally a cosmic joke. Um, but what you just touched on is so important. The suppression of emotions, when we suppress one emotion, we suppress all. And so that has been deemed like, be a good girl, be a good boy, don't cry. Boys don't cry. I mean, I was told not to cry as a child as well. Came from a very like conservative, emotionally cut off family. It caused a lot of issues for me, like depression, anxiety, suicidal like ideation at one point as well when I was a teenager. And I this is the root of I think a lot of these behaviors, because when you don't feel safe to express emotion, emotion is like intimacy. Into me, you see. And
Mm.
so a lot of people avoid these emotions. And even if we're like talking about sex, yes, we're going there. That that is a like sacred energy exchange. Sex is the essentially where the word comes from. So in like a lot of ancient cultures and like pure shamanism, um that is a portal to source, to God. That's a portal to transmute emotions, which means you're supposed to allow yourself to experience these emotions. And this is what's missing from a lot of our culture. And so with like all of like the porn and like all of this stuff that's like programmed into us, it's an avoidance of intimacy. It feels safe. Often people, and you heard a lot of people like confess this, that they at the event like um they were using sexuality to avoid intimacy. And when we do that, yeah, when we do that, we are never fulfilled in those experiences. It's like an endless pit
And
because
it's so, sorry for jumping in.
oh, it's
It's
fine.
so clear and so obvious once you get to the place of seeing it for what it is. And
Yeah.
I guess maybe I shouldn't say that it's easy in any way, because it took me most of my life to
Yeah.
get there. But it's this thing where I think for myself, at least in my experience, and maybe a lot of men,
Yeah.
um, it's like an inch away where you're living your
Yeah.
life, you're doing the things that you think you need to do with women to
Yeah.
get these needs met that you think are the top priority to feel better or to
Yeah.
feel good as a man. And
Yeah.
meanwhile, it's literally like right there, probably with most of them. I think
Yeah.
in my past, I had relationships and casual encounters with women who were
Mhm.
fantastic women that
Mhm.
I unfortunately couldn't recognize. And
Yeah.
because I was so absorbed in trying to take from them, manipulate
Yeah.
them, and
Yeah.
do it in a way that I could feel like, oh, okay, I'm getting something that I think I need. And
Yeah.
meanwhile, cosmic jokes, that's the thing that I sit and have to feel this very kind of I can't remember the word. It's like poetic justice or cathartic. Uh, but to have that kind of laugh at myself, that
Yeah.
I had so many potential opportunities to have amazing relationships that were deep and intimate,
Yeah.
I literally fucked us out of, literally. And
Literally.
yeah,
Yeah. And it's quite common. I would say it's more common. I mean, just look at the divorce rate, look at the infidelity rate. Like I would say that's more common than not in common day culture. And we're programmed into it. We're programmed to outsource this void. We all have this void. The thing is that void can never be met, even in a relationship, like a divine union relationship. That need will never be met by your partner. It can't. Source, God, creator, whatever you want to call it, this infinite intelligence, that is the only thing that can meet that need. And that is within us and all around us. It's always been within us. We just haven't been taught how to access it.
well, I would argue that we've even been lured in the opposite direction of it. And I've got
Oh,
theories
oh,
on,
okay. We got to talk about allures. We'll come back to allures because I talk about this all the time. When I talk about dark forces,
okay.
they know what we want, and there's a way to get what we want in soul alignment with source without compromising our integrity. And there's a way to do it through these allures that it's like, oh, I want that thing, but you're compromising certain aspects. And this is how dark forces work. Like, I hope I'm not freaking you out.
I find this fascinating. So
Okay,
please.
good. I literally have a course called Defense Against the Dark Arts.
I love it. That
Right.
was in Harry Potter, I believe.
I know I borrowed it from Harry Potter. Um, anyways, like my whole last relationship and a situation that I got involved in, which I'm just like outing something here that I haven't told yet in the podcast. A past mentor of mine was like in the Illuminati, cancel clear delete, making this vortex invisible. But yeah, I didn't know obviously until I tracked everything and figured it out. And it was a very big awakening. And I learned about what they were doing and certain things. And they will even bind you to relationships that are not good for you to hold you back. They will put these allures in. I've seen it happen to clients too, like who are deepening in relationship. They'll have like people come in essentially to break up that union for lower frequency situations like that are based in lust. But the thing is, they know our traumas and they know exactly what we want. It is bonkers. So
Wow.
we'll talk about allures more in a second, but I just want to go back to the point where I think this is really important to talk about. And I just figured out or I like reflected on this other day. In my past, all my past relationships, I was very much in fawn response. And you know, that was something I've been working through for a long time with a few mentors, a lot of somatic work. And I feel like I broke through that at that leadership training. Like I really feel like I finally embodied like choosing me, which is a
Yeah.
key code. And thank you for being part of that on the boat situation.
Oh, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So you're like, just take your spot. And I was like, it was mind blowing. I talked about that in the last episode. But, anyways, so the thing that took me so long to understand is initiating the people I let into my life. I talked about this in a course that was called Surrendering to Sacred Union with Source. I taught women how to initiate men in a relationship, but it's not just in relationships. I realized it's in all of life. It's a threshold. It's a sacred threshold of, okay, yes, we get to love everybody and we can also love from a distance. Who is actually like, and I hope nobody takes this the wrong way, but worthy of being in my life, even as a friend, as a client, as a colleague, as a partner. Have they earned the right? And what I mean by that is how are they showing up in their life? Because for me, for so long, and I know a lot of people get stuck in this, and I think it's one of the things that we'll talk about the manipulation tactics shortly, but that a lot of women have backwards that gets used against them is like, like if I had done those exercises like 2 years ago, I would have been like, oh, like, yes, amazing. Like, let's love and light everyone into healing. That's not how it works, especially for the masculine. And when I spoke and I said for the first time, like speaking in such a, like that was so scary for me to speak out and be like, this is exactly the reason that I was hesitant to do that particular exercise. I didn't want to be part of the problem. And I also didn't want to be sexualized and be looked at like an object. And I can't remember what else I said, but there was a few women who talked about sexual abuse and being exploited and X, Y, and Z. And that is when you spoke and you're like, I want to give a public apology. Had I just been like, oh, let's love and light everyone, and that was so beautiful. Yes, it was. And now how are these people going to show up in their life? And that exercise was so powerful. And people are gonna get triggered by this, but triggers are truth. So they illuminate truth. I would say about 85 to 90% of people are going to go back into their old habits. And I would say 10 to 15% of people are going to use that exercise, that shame exercise, as a portal to be like, I am actually going to integrate these changes. I'm going to show up differently. I'm going to make different choices. I'm not going to allow the allures to run my life because they will always be there. Like, I've been in this work for a long time in quantum healing, trauma work, all of it, spirituality. And there's so much, well, I think discernment is a needed key for most people in those communities. It was definitely a big lesson for me, but there's always going to be those allures. I don't care if you're in church all the time. I don't care if you are in all these spiritual communities. I don't care if you're a 9 to 5 or in the 3D. There's always going to be those allures, but the choices that you make, the soul path is always the hardest path and it's always the most rewarding. Just like in a relationship, when you choose to come into divine union, of course, there's going to be other people you're attracted to. Of course, there's going to be opportunities. In fact, there'll be more because you'll be tested. And so I realized it hit me so deep. I'm like, oh, this is such a key. The initiation of like these sacred thresholds for even because we become who we're around. So for so long, I let quite honestly shitty people in my life. I let friends who would seduce my partners in front of me, friends who ended up sleeping with ex-partners, like, and I just I'm like, oh, it's fine, it's fine. It's actually enabling that behavior. And so I'm not judging any of it, but what I realized is if we actually have standards of who we let in our life, and if we actually speak truth and speak things that, out things, so to speak, that's in my experience what allows people to rise and inspires people to rise. It especially inspires the masculine to rise. And that took me way too long to learn, but it was also divine timing. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but is that one of the reasons that you spoke up?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
That
So
was really the reason. I had one or two, I guess, signals that happened prior to that in the work that I did the weekend before in that program, where I did get an opportunity to start to explore really standing and holding myself accountable. But it wasn't until you did what you did. So thank
yeah,
you for that. And I think that just on a level of energy,
yeah,
you're a very feminine woman. You also, no coincidence or no accident,
yeah,
embody the same kind of female traits and beauty that I traditionally would always go and be focused on trying to get more of. So that was a thing that
no,
dawned on me instantly, like there's a reason that this woman who is the archetype of what I've always kind of spent my life chasing is
yeah,
standing next to me in this room and saying these things that are literally calling me to action.
Yeah.
Like, I've got goosebumps saying this right now,
Yeah.
but that was it. Like, that message I received really loud and clear, and
Yeah.
I knew, like, this is it. This is what I'm here to do.
Yeah.
So I felt like very relieved and very light, being able to do that. And it wasn't so much to just get something off of my chest, but it was really to
Yeah.
open myself up to the women in the room, because I know there were a lot of them just like you who had been, and I won't use the word victim, but let's say they were on the receiving end of
Yeah.
behaviors from men
Yeah.
like me. And that was it. That was the thing that I felt like, okay, this gate is open. You can see me, and you can scream at me, you can ask me questions, you can do whatever you want,
Yeah.
and I will stand here, and I'll hold whatever space, or I will conduct whatever interaction I'm
Yeah.
called to. And that felt really good. And so
Yeah.
I think that was something that really was a great lead in to you and I getting to communicate, and then you inviting me to be on this amazing podcast. So yeah, thank you again for doing what you did, because I didn't know that that was a thing that was a long time in the making for you, and that it was kind of
Oh
stuck
yeah.
or uncomfortable. So
I mean, it's a story. It's on the
yeah.
podcast if you want to listen. We're not done yet. We're going on to episode 10 of it because it's a story.
Wow.
I mean, there are so many layers, and it was me waking up to the spiritual matrix and the bypassing. And this is why I was calling things out from not a judgmental place, and not the facilitators. I believe they're very embodied, but and sometimes in these communities, there will be kind of predatory energy that will go to them because they know people who are going to heal, or who want to embody like more leadership or these things. They'll go to these, and so many people have blinders on. I definitely did for so long until I got radically awakened. And I think, like, thank you so much for, firstly, for me, obviously that was so healing, because well, of course I look like your wife, and all the girls that like you were chasing. That's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence you look similar to my ex, like different, but so many similarities. And the
Oh,
fact
you
that
showed me the photo.
oh,
He and I have a
yeah,
lot of resemblances. Absolutely.
100%. I
Yeah.
mean, you're more like grounded in your masculine. He had a lot more feminine energy because when we met, I was very in my masculine. And so there's that. Anyways, we'll get in maybe masculine feminine energies another time. But um but not only for all the women in the room, when you took accountability, I know that was healing for a lot of women, because this is a missing piece usually in situations like they're like whatever, like I don't know if you've studied narcissistic pathology. That was radically awakening for me. I went through a whole second grief process. I studied with Dr. Ramani, and like in this room, and she's saying all of these tactics, which I want to get into the tactics in a moment here. And I was like, oh my God, this is a thing. Like, what? And my friend, who's actually here right now, she sent me this book on Dr. Ramani's work. It's Not You. And then all of a sudden, I'm like in a room with her. I actually didn't know she was teaching at this course I was in. And I realized this isn't like just a situation where like my ex did these things and then all of a sudden went through a grief process where the illusion got crumbled. Because firstly it was like the vision, and that needed to die. Like the contract was over. I started to step into my power and hold standards, and he was like, fuck, I'm not. He was never going to take accountability, and that's fine. That's his journey. But when I realized this is like a pathology, I was like, oh my God. And then that's kind of where I uncovered spiritual narcissism, which is kind of a different conversation, but also not. A lot of the spiritual leaders are doing these exact same tactics, but they're wolves from sheep's clothing. And I have seen it. I have been around so much of it. And I mean, it used to make me really angry. Now I'm like, okay, well, there's lessons to learn for the women in those communities. I had to learn it the hard way. And a lot of women did, and a lot of women are still stuck in it. So hopefully they're listening to this podcast. But where was I going with this? I'm all over the place.
Okay, well, while you rethink where you were going,
Yes.
I want to share that in preparation for this conversation
Yeah.
today, I took it upon myself to get clear on the exact definition of fuckboy because I agreed to do this. And then I was kind of like, I've heard the term thrown around. I think I know what it is. I think I was that.
Yeah.
But I found this, I'm going to pull it up here. Really good article that was on from Men's Health in their sex and relationships column. The authors were Zachary Zane and Corey Ritchie. This was from February of this year.
Awesome.
And they did a really good job of not just defining it, but breaking down in detail. Like I felt like I was reading a bio of myself for a few decades of my life.
I'm dying.
So I don't know if that's something that you like. I'll
Yeah,
send
I
the
would
link.
love to.
Yeah, and you can drop it into the
Okay, for sure. Because that's it. This pathology is literally the same across the board. Like when women will tell me certain things, or even sometimes dudes, I'm like, yeah, that person, like, I already know it's manipulation. It's so easy for me now because I spent hundreds and hundreds of hours. Um, Firstly, like reflecting on everything that happened like in my life and then studying this stuff. I'm like, this is an actual thing. Like it's not just like a random situation, and then healing that imprint. But that drew me to this, which was a catalyst for my soul growth for sure, and my mission. Um, but I remember what I was going to say. So it was not only healing for the women, but I think it was a great embodiment for the men. Because as I said,
Okay.
I mean, that room was amazing and filled with such great people. And where does it go now? How many people are actually going to, because you were there, like a lot of men outed like this, the escorts, the porn, the this, and zero judgment. And I am here for it, to hold space for them to release that shame. And where does it go now? Are they going to go back to that behavior? Because I've watched, well, it was mostly my ex, but I've seen this with other men too. Sometimes it's like, okay, the realization, but then the compulsion they can't get over, or they choose not to because the deep healing and like dark forest clearings will make it so much easier. And then they just go down that hole again. And I think it's a dark place. And you said this to me. You said they're just hurting themselves, and you were just hurting yourself and you didn't even know it. Um,
Well,
and
I was hurting these women as well, but
for sure.
and this is probably jumping like quite far ahead for where I think we can go with the conversation, but I don't think it's a coincidence that after I had been forgiven by my wife, because the biggest, I don't know if we can call it crime or
Mm-hmm.
misconduct, mistreatment that I did in my life was to be unfaithful to my wife.
Yeah.
So when she had forgiven me and
Mm-hmm.
I had the opportunity to become accountable for the things that I had done,
Yeah.
we moved forward. It didn't happen overnight,
Yeah.
but the interesting lesson to the point you made earlier that men who are doing these things are hurting themselves. I hadn't forgiven myself. She had gotten really far along with where we were going with the marriage, and I felt like I was too, but it really wasn't until what we did in Austin together that
Yeah.
I actually realized, okay, I haven't forgiven myself. So again, no accident. I think men
Yeah.
at the time may not realize what they're doing, but deep down it's in there. And it was for me, and it was that was the harder thing was to
Yeah.
let go of the hurt that I had done to my own self.
That's so powerful. I'm glad you said that because that's what keeps us in the shame cycle. If we don't forgive ourselves, then we're still going to continue to do the behaviors or have the compulsions. It's part of the healing process. And I really resonate with that because when I was super manipulative, like if you met me 2 years ago, I was so leaky with my sexual energy. And it was coming from a deep fear of not feeling provided for, or not trusting source, not trusting the masculine, not trusting myself to have my own back. And so I would manipulate men so that I could feel safe. Um, And part of my healing journey was forgiving myself. And I mean, that was years. And I remember doing like mirror work, and it so much like I was carrying so much shame as well for that behavior, and then also for being duped and stupid in my last stupid quote in my last relationship. I had to go through all of it though. That's the ironic thing, to like do the work that I do, like at least this vein of the work, not necessarily like the manifestation stuff, but even that, because people can like manifest a partner, but they're only going to manifest equal to their energetic frequency. So if they have these deeper imprints, like I did, I'm like, oh, manifested a partner. Cosmic joke. Um, yeah, in alignment with deep imprints, like from pre-birth in my mom's womb. Um, and then we're just going to perpetuate that cycle. And so that's where the deeper work is. But I think that not forgiving self, like God forgives us unconditionally. I think sometimes it's easier for a partner to forgive us than it is for us to forgive ourselves. And part of this is programming and conditioning, and not feeling like we got the love we did growing up, or the love we desire growing up, because of our parents' conditioning and their trauma and their ability to love us or show love in the different love languages. But that's such a big key, because until we fully forgive ourselves it and love that version of ourselves. Well, actually, I remember Chris came out to us, our mutual friend, to me, and was like, or no, it was one of the facilitators, and said, well, I said, I feel I don't want to like embody this manipulation, because we were playing with archetypes. And I'm like, that literally makes me feel sick. And they were like, that means you still haven't, there's still something there. Like you haven't loved that version of yourself. And
Yeah.
she was right. I hated it. It made me sick. And then I was like, whoa, I had to actually do some forgiveness work that night and sit with that version of myself and see how deeply wounded she was, how unresourced she was, and why she did what she did. And then that dissolved any judgment I had, because I judged other women who were like manipulated with their sexual energy so much. It would make me so angry. And then I was like, oh, I don't judge it anymore. Like I actually had compassion. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's why you're doing it. And also it's sad, because manipulation can only be met with manipulation.
Hmm.
Can't fake frequency. So let's go into manipulative tactics on this vein.
Okay. Well, let's start with the definition from, I think this is Urban Dictionary. This was also in the article that I mentioned from Men's Health. So it says
Yeah.
a fuckboy is that guy, the one who doesn't respect women but relies on them heavily. He's distant, doesn't care about other people's time, won't commit. He's self-absorbed, does stupid things, and fucks with others' emotions. I think that's a pretty succinct
Yeah.
summary for sure. And the key there is fucks with others' emotions. And I think just to give a really high level of what I would describe my playbook and my strategies during my fuckboy stage of life to be, is that it was a combination of being really good at building a shallow emotional connection,
Mm-hmm.
lots of superficial charm, just getting them to let me in enough that I
Yeah.
could make them feel special. So that was
How
step
did
one.
you do that?
That was
We
tactic one.
talked about this.
Yeah.
You would
Yeah.
make women feel special. I'm going to caveat this. So, what draws us to, as somebody on the other side of this, what drew me to situations like that is because I didn't feel special innately. So that was the wound I had to heal.
Well,
One of
you
the
are
wounds.
not alone. You're not
Yeah.
alone, Jen. I
Oh,
think that,
it's like,
well,
oh, most people, I'm
right.
realizing, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm not alone in this not feeling special. And so when we find it within ourselves, we don't need to outsource it. When we don't have it, this is where this manipulation tactics, we're like, oh my God, he's the one. Like, and
Yeah.
maybe he is. But from a place of manipulation, that's again, the relationship's going to be bonded through manipulation of the
Yeah.
other person or of self who do I need to be in order
Yeah.
for them to love me? So
So I have to share this because I feel like we'll probably dive into some of the behind the scenes. If he says this, it means this. And this is really probably something that I wasn't conscious of at the time.
yeah,
But the women who I was meeting and interacting with generally were quite attractive to me. They were special. Like there were things about them that were easy targets, let's call it, for me to hone in on and do these manipulative things and get
yeah,
these levers on their emotions. But those things at the outset or on the surface level were still true. So
yeah,
this is kind of the again the cosmic joke, which is that rather than dive into those things and truly appreciate them and actually cherish them and uphold them and treat these women the way
yeah,
that they deserve to be treated, I was finding those things and then seeing ways to use them as tools for manipulation. Um, and I think because there might have been that kernel of truth that was always there, there was
yeah,
plausibility. So even though I was sweet talking and being
yeah,
smooth and making them feel way better than maybe someone's made them ever feel about their crooked tooth that I actually thought was kind of cute, they might have never experienced that. So it
yeah,
was this, I guess, overarching desire on my part to win them over. And this is
yeah,
the thing that I should also mention is that I had a lot of interactions and a lot of experiences where it didn't go to sex and it didn't turn
yeah,
into things that would have been in that realm, but where even the intention to just play the game and to do these things where it
yeah,
was, let's call it playing with energy, playing with sexual energy, playing
yeah,
with attraction, even that, it was a thing where it would be like probably not unlike the dopamine rush that people get when they're getting a lot of attention on social media. I'm not a big social media guy, but I totally get it. Like I have had
yeah,
that in small doses, and like
yeah,
I'm really glad that that wasn't happening during that stage of my life because it would
yeah.
have been even more disastrous. Um, so yeah, that's tactic number one is like finding something little about them, but making it overwhelmingly positive and special.
Okay, do you have okay, there's two places I want to go with this. Do you have an example? And then the other thing I want to talk about is what was driving you to do that behavior? I mean, I know
Yeah.
now,
So,
but
yeah, I can give you some examples. So, one, I distinctly remember this girl who was quite cute
mhm,
and had a crooked tooth. And I actually liked it. Like, I was kind of like,
yeah,
I, and I said to her something about the tooth. I didn't say it right away, but I made sure that she felt like it was something that was special or different. And
yeah,
I'm a business guy. Like I studied entrepreneurship in university. I had already started businesses while I was still a student. So I was
yeah,
really in the mindset of being able to communicate value and doing
yeah,
things that would show differentiation or show them that I understood what was different and special about them.
yeah,
So I think that was something that I was doing in a professional capacity, and then doing it in a social setting just
yeah,
felt like very natural to me. And I think this is something that for the women who are tuned in, you may notice that that's consistently a trait of the fuck boys is that they are very confident, very good communicators,
yeah,
and they'll probably not only get that communication opened up in a fun way, but they might start making you feel like you trust them more than you probably should, at least at the outset.
yeah.
So, okay, so sorry, what was the second part of that question?
Okay, so um, well, I have another question now.
Okay,
We'll
okay.
go back to the second part. How would one know the difference between an authentic, like I really like your tooth, like feeling special, and a manipulated one?
So this is a very nuanced answer. And that's such a great question because I think this is really, if every woman had the answer to that, we probably wouldn't need to have this conversation. And
Yeah,
the harm that gets done to women, and I know it goes the other way around, but I think in the context of my experience and most of the people I've known who were, let's call it, sexually predatory or sexually opportunistic with how they dated or did these relationships, it was generally men doing it to women or at women's expense. So I think, and I don't want this to come across as like a cop out answer, but I
Yeah.
think women are blessed with an unbelievably powerful tool, which is their intuition.
I
And
was just gonna say if everyone had intuition. Y'all,
yeah,
I'm starting a healing school next year or in the fall. I don't know when. It's called
so
Oracle Wisdom Academy to learn how to trust your channel and to get past the emotions and have a pure channel so you know that's how you learn discernment.
well, that would be phenomenally helpful in this arena that we're discussing. And the reason I say that is that I think many women have a gut feeling where it's just something isn't right and
Yeah.
where it's too good to be true. And they're right. And I remember literally being told that a bunch of times by women who I would be playing the game with and doing my charm and my, pickup type of tactics.
Pickup artists.
Yeah, pickup artistry, right? Like that was a thing
It's a
when I
thing.
was in this stage of my
Oh, I
life.
dated a guy who lived with the people who wrote the book. He lived with them in
Oh,
LA. Like,
wow. Oh
yeah.
my God. I read that book. I know exactly. That was called Project Hollywood. That was like this mansion that all these pickup artists live
Yep.
in
And
the early
it's
2000s.
I remember one of my really good friends, he's like married and like now has a baby and I was in a different relationship and he was like, "Yo, Jill, you got to read this book. Like this dude is like
The Game. The
manipulating,
book was
blah blah
called The
blah."
Game.
Yeah.
Daniel Strauss. Yeah.
And I was like, "Whoa." And then I was talking so anyways, and then I dated this other guy shortly after. And I just need to talk about this for a second because I think it's really important. Another manipulation tactic. So I go through this big breakup. This guy had cheated on me with like my friends, ex-friends, and I was a match to it. I didn't have discernment. That wound was so big, thought he was my soulmate, whatever. This is years ago. But then going through this breakup, this other dude swoops in and is like there for emotional support and all of this stuff. He lives like far away. We end up studying healing together, of all things. And there's a lot of spiritual fuckboys, guys. Just because somebody's spiritual or interpersonal development does not mean that they are in integrity or doesn't mean that the look at people's intentions behind their actions. That is the biggest key. Not just the actions, the intention behind the actions. So, but basically what happened is the manipulation. I see this happen a lot when you're in a vulnerable state. I mean, it happened to a woman there. She had a breakdown about it. Um, when you're in a vulnerable state, firstly, if you're emotional, your intuition, you don't have access to it. Not nearly as clear. Your channel is not clear. Emotion is not intuition. Intuition is subtle. It is calm. This is where I had these like sobering moments, so to speak, when I was in that past relationship where I wasn't in my emotion. And I was like, I knew it was like, this is something's so off. Like I knew, but what stopped me from leaving was that wound of not feeling special. This is why core healing is so important. And there's also going to be some people here watching this that I might trigger or illuminate something for you. Some people are saying like somatic work isn't important. I personally disagree because I believe somatic, by the way, is of the body. I believe if we're not processing these emotions, if we are not doing the core healing, then we can know to leave. We can know what it's going on and we'll turn a blind eye to it. And I have done that so many times. And this is until I finally hit rock bottom and did the deepest core healing I have ever done in my life. And it was not a one-time thing. It took months. It was intense. There was grief portals. There was a lot of unconscious wounds. And so once I went through that, all of a sudden, my intuition, I could listen to it. And not only that, it was so much stronger.
Wow.
Like
Well,
my discernment now is like people will send me stuff. I'm like, that's false light. Don't trust, would never work with that healer. Like it's, I'm so quick with it now because I went through that. But this is one of the things that most people aren't willing to go through, is that core healing. And the core healing is also what allows us, and I don't think core healing can be done just through the mind. I think the somatics are necessary for the full embodiment, because the traumas hold the belief structures, and the traumas are what unconsciously control us, just like the shadow. Until it's integrated, it's what unconsciously controls people. And in my experience, and I can only speak from my experience, and also a lot of clients I've worked with, they're like, I did the mindset work, I did the whatever, like none of it's working. And I know I need to take this action. I know I need to leave this partnership. I know I need to quit my job. My intuition's telling me to. I know this person's bad for me, but why can't I? You can't, because the wound is running your behavior. And sometimes dark forces as well are working through that wound. They can only work through the wounds. But regardless of dark forces, for those of you who are very 3D, who are listening to this, because I feel like there's going to be some people, the wound is driving your behavior. And until that is healed on a core level, which I don't think can be done without somatic work, which literally rewires your nervous system, then you won't have the capacity to leave that job or that relationship or that situationship or whatever is causing you that pain. And sustainable change, in my experience, can't be bypassed, which is why when we did sacred rage practices, that was so powerful. When we allow ourselves to cry, like even that moment when you took accountability and I broke and you gave me a hug and you broke, you cried. Maybe not as deep as I did, but like you broke, you did, in a beautiful way. And there's been so much shame. You guys want to know why there's so much shame around feeling emotions? It is to control you. It is the matrix of control, of suppression, of oppression, of enslavement. That's just the truth. So when we can experience these emotions and heal the core wounds, we get our sovereignty back, we get our life back, and we get all the things, all the abundance, all the resources just start to find us. And it's like, what the actual F, everything we've been taught is the opposite of how to actually get what we want on a soul level. It's bonkers. I just went on a whole transmission there. I just thought that it was very important, because that's where so many people are trapped. And the false light will tell you not to feel. The matrix will tell you not to feel. That's weak. When I see a dude cry, like when you cried, I'm like, wow, that's strength. That is vulnerability. That is strength. When we did the sacred rage practices, I was like, that is strength. That is true. Like I said, like I've never felt that level of safety in a room before, because the rage wasn't suppressed. It was channeled. And that also creates in our creator field, don't F with me energy, which is so powerful. It's great for business too. And sorry, one more thing, back to these patterns. So we can't outrun our patterns and our soul lessons. So for me, it was dating these men over and over again. And I was like, okay, I would just like break up with them, right? But then I didn't heal the wound. And that's why I had to go to such a deep level of deception with my most recent ex, where, I mean, that was like, you talk about refinement in these manipulation tactics. It was refinement. And then everything, but I knew something was off from the moment I met him. And I didn't trust it, because I didn't want to see the truth, because then I was outsourcing my value. I was outsourcing my sense of specialness. And this is what I believe makes women a target to this, is that they don't feel special innately. And if they're outsourcing, oh, I don't have a relationship, therefore I'm not worthy. That's all bullshit. If we outsource anything, like even our like productivity or like what we achieve doesn't make us special. Who we are, we're all divinely special, and we are all unique in our own way, and we all have gifts that nobody else has. We all have our own soul blueprint that nobody else has, and a mission that nobody else can fulfill on this planet. And so it is when we understand this, and thank you, Brett, because it was like one of the final pieces of like really like, oh, I don't need to prove, when you were like, oh, just take your seat on the boat. And I was watching everybody go up there and be like, I should be chosen because blah, blah, blah. And I was like, whoa, I don't need to, like, why is everyone trying to prove themselves? And then I'm like, I'm just going to prove myself to God. God and I know, or source and I know, like, why I deserve to be on this boat. And I'm choosing to be on this boat, not because of my skills, not because of my achievements, not because of how I look or all of this stuff. And ironically, on the healing journey, often, and this happened to me, people will lose certain things. Like I got really bad acne when I was going through that really intense healing journey, and then rashes on my face that literally tried everything, wouldn't go away until I started to unconditionally love myself. And I was like, oh, that's key. Okay, anyways, back to the conversation. Um, of what we're talking about before I went on this whole rampage, the tactics and the refinement in these tactics. So the intuition, yes, we always do know, and that's why people don't listen to it, at least in my experience.
So you had asked the question, Jill, what can women do? How can they guard
No.
against these tactics?
Yes.
And I think the short answer, at least for the early tactics, where it's the pickup artistry, it's the superficial charm, it's the stuff that's going to happen in a social setting before you may even have exchanged contact info.
Yeah.
I don't know that there is any way to really guard against that. And I don't want to be the guy who says, hey, be guarded and don't let
Yeah.
strangers talk to you, because I think to a certain point in an interaction with a man, most
Mhm.
women can and should feel reasonably comfortable, provided it's not in like a dark alley or something
Yeah.
that could be dangerous just by the nature of it. So I think where, and this is going to sound really bad, but I think where most women do get the opportunity to look at it and say, oh, maybe this guy doesn't have good intentions for me, it's often too late. It's often in hindsight, or
Yeah.
when it gets to a point that maybe there's been decisions made that she has done out of that. And I had a big smile where you were talking about emotion not being the same as intuition. And
Yeah.
so that really resonated with me, because I think a lot of the playbook and the tactics that the players and the fuckboys really go to go
Yeah.
to the arena with are very centered around playing with emotions and probably pulling a woman out of her center and out of her ability to intuit things, because she's being literally in some cases swept off her feet.
Yeah.
I would feel no discomfort or awkwardness literally going up and grabbing a woman and twirling her around like we were dancing while
Yeah.
I hadn't even said hello to her. And you'd be
Yeah.
surprised at how often they would love it. Like they would look
Yeah.
at me and be like, why did you just do that? Who are you? What is this? And
Charming.
that was it. Now I've got them off center. Now I can
Yeah.
work my charm. And I mean, the few times that that didn't work, it didn't matter. I was on to the next two or three or five women with whatever I wanted to say. So, um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think in hindsight, a lot of what I was doing, not even consciously, was really doing this
Yeah.
escalating emotional journey where it was that combination of being different and special and going on a ride. And
Yeah.
here's the crazy thing. Like these are things that I do for my wife when we're having date night and I want her to have a great time. It's
Yeah.
just the intent and the spirit of it is very different. It's not
Yeah.
to manipulate or to try and
Yeah.
get laid like when I
Yeah.
was doing this as a 25-year-old.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I guess again, what I'm trying to reiterate here is that there really is no way to discern between fake fuckboy charm and genuine confident charm from a healthy masculine man.
Yeah. Except the woman always knows.
I hope. And if there's ways for us to help facilitate that, I'm
Yeah.
here for it. Yeah.
Well, we'll talk about that in a second. That's super important. But like you said, this emotional manipulation. I want to reiterate this. I've said it before, I've said it on other episodes. Emotion is not intuition. When we are highly emotional, whether it's a low emotion or a high emotion, like joy and bliss, we are still not centered. We're not balanced. It's very hard when to access our intuition or even channeling when we are at a high or a low, or sadness or grief. I will, this is why it's so important to process your emotions and then to come back to that inner peace, that inner knowing, that stillness. That is where we know the answers. That is literally the only reason, like, I was able to decode everything that was happening with like that past mentor and the false light. It was in these, I would take a week of like silence, and I couldn't do it when my ex was here or we were traveling. I was ungrounded. This is another tactic that I've seen people do, is they'll take you away from your base, your friends. This happened to me, your family, your places where your touchstones are, because you're not grounded, you're off center. And when we're off center, everything gets skewed. So a lot of people will be like, oh, I feel fear. That's intuition. No, it's not. That's called trauma. And this is where the facilitation of trauma healing, and maybe we'll like end up doing, I mean, I already do workshops on this, but like maybe we'll like do some in Calgary with like our mutual friend. But because this work, I've been reminded how important this work is to do, especially in person, so people can process that stuff
Yeah.
and come back to their center.
Well,
Because when we're in that channel, we know everything. It's energy speaks louder than words. But when there's, and this is why in like spiritual communities, people go in spiritual communities, they're like, well, no, it's all love and light, everyone has pure intentions. I have now seen that actually a lot of those communities, not all of them, have a lot of distortion and ill intent, especially by certain spiritual leaders. Red flags we've talked about in past episodes, like harems of women, like just anyways. There's a lot of red flags that you can go back to old episodes. But when we find our center, we just know. We know what the intent is. We can feel it. And when we have these deep core wounds, or when we're emotionally high or emotionally low, we don't have anything. We start to manipulate ourselves and our own intuition. Anything over like an 18% emotional is going to be manipulated. And this is why, like, even for myself, like I will trust my own intuition over everything, but I have gotten really good at processing my emotions, doing like my somatic practices. Like if I'm emotional about something, I'll do my own shamanic breath work. And I'm like, okay, come to a grounded place. But certain things I will get other intuitives to verify. I'll still trust my own channel, but I'm like, hey, I'm really emotional about this. Like, can you look in? Can you verify? And then I'll kind of regulate my own intuition with that. I'll still trust my own channel above it, but it's because I have all these somatic tools. Most people don't have these somatic tools. And I think that's why, I mean, even if we look at the media, like how you watch the media, everybody's put in fear and then they can't think. They literally become dumb because blood rushes from the brain to the legs so you can run faster because you're in fight and flight. You can't think in fight and flight. You lose access to certain parts of the brain, your intuition, your creativity, even like being in your receptive energy, which is intuition. That's why the feminine has more access. And like, sorry, men, like you have access to intuition too, but the feminine has a greater capacity because the feminine energy is the receptive energy. And also we have wombs, which are literal portals. And like womb wisdom is the oracle. Like our wombs are literal oracles. If we have transmuted the trauma and have learned discernment and have these tools, this is why in ancient days, they had these practices. They had sacred rage practices. They had drumming circles. They had, look at my drums. They had all of these, they had initiations as they went into womanhood, to manhood, but we have lost this. And this is this is why we're in a society that is riddled with addiction, riddled with distortion, where the divorce rate is obnoxious because people don't have the necessary support and tools, and they have been hidden, um, to come back to their center, to have that moral compass, to make choices that are actually in highest alignment, because the wounds and the suppression and the unintegrated shadow has been running the show because this is the programming. Yeah, I'm very passionate about this. Okay.
I
So,
appreciate it.
what do you think drew you to these behaviors? Because I think this is important to talk about for men or women who are having like compulsions to, maybe they're in a relationship, maybe they're married, maybe they're not in a relationship, but they want one, but they're like, why do I just keep jumping from woman to woman or man to man? Um, what do you think for you drives this or drove this behavior? Because you are married
Yeah.
and you were unfaithful to your wife and you guys almost went through a divorce. I don't know how much you want to tell, or I
Yeah,
can.
it's all fair
Okay.
game. So yeah,
Okay. So
anything. Okay,
so
well, how about I answer the first one on what was the driver for me to take on the pattern of behavior that I did with women for most of my adult life.
yeah.
And the short answer is that it was what I thought I needed to do to become who I thought I wanted to be. So same thing that you see with people who are entrepreneurs or money focused, where they might make $10 million and that's not
Not enough.
perpetual bliss for them. They're like, well, fuck, there's people with 100 million, like I got to
Yeah.
get there. And then those people may look at billionaires and say, oh, I suck, like I'm not in the billionaire club. And I'm pretty sure that Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg and these other folks, they don't live in perpetual bliss either. There's a gentleman by the name of Dan Bilzerian. I'm not sure if you've seen him or his content.
Maybe.
He's like an extreme parody of masculine fuckboy
Mhm.
everything. And I've watched him be interviewed and where he's describing what it's like to have a half a dozen of these Instagram models doing all manner of different wild sexual things with
Yeah.
him concurrently. And he's not living in perpetual bliss. He talked about wanting to hang out with friends and go surfing and play board games, and that he had felt like he ruined the experience of sex for himself
Yeah.
because he kept pushing it and making it more extreme.
Yeah.
Another thing that you've probably heard of is that this happens with porn addiction, where
Yeah.
people inevitably end up into weirder and darker and
Yeah.
more bizarre forms of porn, where they would never have thought that they would ever find arousal in those things. But this is just the nature
Yeah.
of the escalating false path, if we can call it
Yeah.
that. So I think my inner lack or sense of something missing, and that I somehow was going to fill that void with a woman in my bed.
Yeah.
And, if she's even more beautiful than the last one, this is going to do it. I'm going to
Yeah.
feel like I've fulfilled whatever I need to. And I
Yeah.
remember being like probably 27 years old. I had a really nice custom Harley. I had a convertible. I was living
Yeah.
in a gorgeous condo that was like downtown Calgary.
Yeah.
And I had like 10 girlfriends that were all rotating through whatever night I wanted to be with them. And I remember my friends at the time saying, man, like you're doing awesome. I mean, this is so cool. Like,
Yeah.
show me how to do the stuff that you do with women,
Yeah.
and feeling like, oh my God, if they actually knew what I really feel like,
Yeah.
none of them would say this. And that was a sinking feeling because at that moment, I knew I was wrong. And I knew that I
Yeah.
could keep going in this direction. I could become a combination of Hugh Hefner and Bill Gates, for crying out loud, and that I knew it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
But the sad thing was that I had no idea how to get to what did work, even though it was literally right in front of me. It was just that by that age, even though I was still in my 20s, I had layered on so much ego and persona. And
Yeah.
I mean, it was helpful in ways that were financially related. And being
Yeah.
good at picking up women, a lot of that type of personality tends to carry over into being good at sales or being good at
Yeah.
getting deals closed. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, I ended up staying on that path for many more years, even after having that sinking feeling that like this isn't it.
Yeah.
So okay, sorry, I went on at length there, but does
No,
that
it's
help
all good.
give the context of like what's the motivation?
Yeah, for sure. And I'm so glad you said that. It's the same wound. The woman, I'm not special. I'm not significant. I'm not unique. So that charm starts to falsely fill that wound for a short period of time. And then what drives the men in this behavior, in the examples we're talking about, is the same wound. I'm not good enough. This will make me feel good enough. This will make me feel worthy. And that's the matrix of more. And it's a never ending cycle. And it's like the more you get sometimes, the more empty you feel. And
Totally.
I've talked to men who had issues with escorts or who had issues. Well, this specific one, I'm going to tell the story really quick. Of They were like, it is one of the darkest paths, the darkest paths. And I thought someone was going to pull me out of it. If I got in a relationship, then it was my fucking ex. Let's just, whatever. He's like, he literally told me, like, you had to pull me out of it. And I didn't know what was going on yet until like I had visions, and then they were verified. And then he was like, yeah, you had to be the one to pull me out of it. But the thing is, nobody can pull you out of it. Your wife
Right.
can pull you out of it. You said she loved you, she forgave you, but you had to forgive yourself and realize the darkness. It's like sometimes it has to get so dark. And this happened to me in different ways in my spiritual journey, awakening journey, whatever you want to call it, consciousness journey. Of the life I lived 10 years ago is radically different than now, but it had to get so bad that I was like, things need a shift, or like, I'm not going to be on this planet. And
Wow.
okay, what else is new, fam? At this part of the story, as often does when I speak these radical truths, the tech was having some issues. So a piece of that cut out. Basically, what I was saying is often what catalyzes these radical shifts or the inspiration for the deeper healing is when people hit rock bottom, which is what happened to me years ago. And every single like deep layer of healing has actually come from a really intense situation, from either somebody passing or deep wounds coming up for myself or breakups, etc. And often we are trying to save people, which I have gotten myself into before. The wounded healer, bleeding heart healer is one of my teachers calls me. But we really have to learn to honor that is their journey. And this is often what needs to happen. Like, people need to go down to a dark place in order for their healing to be catalyzed. There is a breaking point where people choose this can no longer go on. And so in that last relationship, I was trying to be the savior, and it wasn't working. So honoring that is a super important part. And whether you have somebody in your life dealing with addiction or dealing with situations like this, if you're in a partnership, well, hold standards. That's very important, especially for your creator field. Otherwise, it will affect all areas of your life. I speak from experience. But it's really important to not judge people and to truly allow them, if they have to go down like a dark path, to honor that and realize it is their soul path. And that is what will catalyze eventually their growth and their transformation. I call it loving people from a distance. Unconditional self-love starts with the unconditional love of self, not the sacrifice of self for somebody else. Okay, so we're going to go back to initial recording. And this is why there is a gap in the recording, because it cut out during that point. So I did my best to fill you in with what I said when the internet decided to cut out from interference. If you've been here a while, you know all about this interference. But here we go. We just make it work. So that's what catalyzes often these shifts. And if we just touch on the porn thing that you said, the weirder and weirder, this is all by intention. For all y'all that don't know, like the people that run that industry, they know what they're doing. It is riddled with entities, and you're opening up your most sacred, powerful energy to these things to siphon it, is what you're doing. People don't know this though, right? And so again, I used to work with a lot of men who had porn addictions years ago. I specialized in addictions, and I'm actually going to step back into that because I'm realizing, wow, this is like actually really needed. It's the same thing that I do with manifestation and all of that. It's core healing. But because they work through the wounds, and there is what happens when people watch porn, and zero judgment here, but they learn to objectify the opposite sex. So instead of cultivating that energy and getting like that bliss, and that like that energy can literally, it's a portal as well to other realms. It's a portal to like ecstasy, natural ecstasy. It's a portal to, like, if people are wanting like full body orgasms, that level of life force energy and pleasure is not possible when you're objectifying your partner. It's just not possible. And so what I often, and I think anyways, never mind. But what I often say to people is like, if they're struggling with these things, I'm like, okay, so you can't do it for your partner. You can't do it for anybody else. You have to choose to do it. Because if you're doing it for somebody else, it will inevitably fail. And you have to have an anchor point, a North Star of, why do you actually want to shift this behavior, and realize the gifts that come with that, like sacred sexuality, divine union. There are massive gifts. And there's so many studies, even about wealth, that it's like 90% of the millionaires on this planet are married. And so there's literally statistics of like, you're wanting to cultivate more abundance in your life, you're wanting to cultivate greater levels of pleasure, like that level of what people are trying to achieve with porn, or being fuck boys, or fuck girls, whatever, fuck women. Is that it? That's not even like, I just made up a new term. But it works. I literally have friends who are trying to fuck their grief away. Wow. So like female friends. So it goes both ways, and it doesn't work. And it's this rabbit hole. But everything that you're
Sorry, I was going to say, I've seen a lot of the financial incentive being this thing that just in my life, I've seen women gravitate towards, where, and the two often find each other, where the guys who want to get into bed with these beautiful women find these women who want into their wallet. I mean, there's like sugar baby websites that are just for that purpose. So this is a thing where men are trying to fuck their way out of their sense of lack, and women are, I think, maybe trying to shop their way out of it.
okay.
At least what I've seen, more of that than them wanting sex to heal, or to fake heal, like to cope, to use it as a crutch. So
Yes.
have you noticed this too, like the whole
Yes, I'm going to be really
economy
vulnerable
thing?
here. So firstly, like I used to work with women who were on the sugar daddy, whatever websites.
Yeah.
One of them at Cactus Club, a restaurant here. One of them was like, you should go on there. And I was like, what the actual fuck? But what I will say is, I judged it, but when I did my deepest shadow work, and I'm like, how was I a match to this? Manipulation can only be met with manipulation. Well, he gave me all of these nice gifts and flowers, like a fucking diamond watch on our first official date. I mean, we had known each other for like years, but Same fucking wound. And I, years ago, I would date men who, I dated a couple of very wealthy men, and I was like, this is not it. Like legit billionaires. And I was like, this is not it. And then I went through, like, I guess, I don't know, shifts and whatever. And then I was like, oh, like I need a man to provide for me if I'm going to be safe. And so, yeah, it was like this, it was like outsourcing my safety. And
Yeah.
then I went through um a like a bunch of spiritual stuff because I was so deeply in lack. And then I learned the codes of abundance. And then I was like, oh, I can provide for myself. Not only that, I can abundantly provide for myself. However, here's the catch, because it's that same wound. And so I was so confused because in my last relationship, like he had a lot more money than me, but I manifest abundance like very easily because I know these codes, and it's been a healing journey with that energy, with provision, with source. There's certain universal laws around this. Once you learn them, you can integrate them. Like I literally have a course or like a 3-day event I'm doing this week on this, but it was so fascinating because when I really looked, I was like, what the fuck? Like, I wasn't with him for the money because he lives in such scarcity that I paid for most of the stuff. But I realized, oh, when he would like buy me nice things, or the times he did pay for the bill at restaurants or whatever, it made me feel special.
Mm.
So for me, I think that was the deeper wound of like, and I think this is for a lot of women, they want to feel special. Oh, he bought me this like necklace. I'm special because I don't feel it inside versus it being cherry on top energy. So I think a lot of women are looking, they're outsourcing that safety firstly. And they're like, hey, I need to be provided for, but they don't realize that they're the common denominator. Like we can manifest abundance through source, and sure, it can come through a partner. We can also manifest more abundance through partners.
Yeah.
I've done that. A lot of women have done this. You'll notice a lot of men, if a woman's conscious of how to utilize their energy, and like universal laws, that they will amplify the wealth. Women are amplifiers. They'll amplify the wealth of their partner. Like wombs are literally amplifiers. But if the partner's in scarcity, they're also going to amplify that because again, women are amplifiers, wombs are amplifiers. Um, but it was interesting because yeah, I was like, I remember journaling on this of like, okay, if relationships are divine emanations, which I believe they are, then how was I a match to this manipulation? Well, firstly, I was manipulating myself, but secondly, that wound still was driving my behavior because he started, I mean, the relationship started with like flowers and that watch, and this is so funny because I knew like I wasn't fully like something was off, and I ended it once first and then I got pulled back into it. And this was a tell. He was like, oh, well, Valentine's Day was like X amount of dollars. And I was like, wow, he thinks I'm an object. Like, that was a tell. But how did I get drawn back in? Well, firstly, there were really beautiful moments. They were my favorite moments of just like having cacao and like drawing on each other's backs and like just these very innocent moments, going to the park. Like I've come to a place where I'm like, it is about those moments. And that wound was still so deep. And like my whole thing with my parents is like, they would give better gifts to our family friends on Christmas. That was a deep unconscious wound of mine. I'm like, oh, I'm not worthy. So now this other man is making me feel worthy because he's giving me gifts. So I feel special in this dynamic, and then bypassing my intuition that something was deeply off.
At least you were getting gifts. When I was doing my thing, it was the reverse. I had some of these women making me food and bringing it to me and treating me like I was the princess that was,
Well,
it was crazy. But I know some
it,
men who do the economic exchange,
Yeah.
the baby. I mean, they're doing escorts and doing prostitution too, but it's very fascinating listening to your account of being on the receiving end of these men who,
Yeah.
and I don't want to be disparaging on these guys, but the feedback that I heard from some of the women who have been in that situation was that it seemed as though money was all they had to offer. And so
And then,
that was what they led with.
so yeah, I think that's common too. And this, if we talk about red flags, I think this is a red flag where it started with the gifts and it started with, taking me to dinner or whatever. I didn't see all his like really stingy behavior
Mm.
until it shifted. And then all of a sudden it was like, he'd be like, do you want a coffee? And I'd be like, yeah, sure. Can I get a misto? And then he's like, can't you just get a drip coffee? I'm like, this is like $1. This is somebody who like brags about money all the time. I'm like, I'll just pay for it. So then I started paying for all this shit. Like
Wow.
I spent so much money in that relationship because I didn't want to lose the relationship. And I'm like, oh, I don't want money to be an issue. I can manifest more money. Like it, but here's the catch too. So I think that is a common, and Dr. Amani talks about this, a common thing where it starts with all this extravagant stuff. They're like generous, but then it flips. And then you're in fawn and you're doing everything for them and you're giving them all your time and energy. And even sometimes I know a woman who literally, this dude like stole 60 grand from her. He's like, oh, I need this. And like was all the things perfect on paper. And then he's like, I need 60 grand. And then he dumped her and left her in another country. And I'm like, this stuff happens. And I think this is like a more extreme example of it, of like, because by nature, women want to be provided for. It's not when it's from a pure place. Like, I still want to be provided for. When I get married, like, I don't want to have to be worried, like, when I have children, about my business being the main breadwinner. It's not from a place of like, because I've done so much healing now, it's not from a place of like, oh, I need to feel special. It's like, I don't want that pressure on my nervous system. And I also do believe consciously, when we have consciously done a lot of healing and integration, I think wealth is a byproduct of that. So I mean, if a dude can't even afford like an apartment, like, or like rent, which is common for some of these like pickup artists, that's a red flag. That shows me, at least, that he hasn't done his work. Like, what has he been doing with his time and energy? You know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
think biologically women do want to be provided for, but what's the intention behind it? And not to realize like, well, A, to realize source is our only provider, period. Like, source is the source of our supply, God, whatever you want to call it. And even if it's coming through a partner, we can manifest abundance through a partner. It's one of the funnels. But so I think that's an innate thing. But where the wounding comes in is the energetics behind it. For me, it was feeling special. And then all of a sudden feeling like all this stuff was like getting taken from me. And then there was layers of me giving up my business, well, like not focusing on my business because he wanted all my time and energy. He didn't want me to be with my friends. This is another red flag, I think, pulling you away from the touchstones, where all of a sudden the business was like, I looked at the graphs and it was like going up, up, up. And then as soon as that relationship officially started, like after, because basically for you, like I ended it and then I got pulled back into it, but we weren't official. The second time we were official, my business like tanked and I wasn't
Oh, wow.
focusing on it. I was like giving all my time to him, all my energy to him, fun response. Yeah, like, can I cook for you? Like, what do you need? We were traveling the world. My nervous system was so dysregulated because we were traveling so much to like help facilitate for free for this like community that turned out to not be false light community, which obviously didn't know at the time. I thought this dude was like the divine, that mentor, the divine embodiment of the divine masculine. And he talked about honoring the feminine, his girlfriend, until I got close to his girlfriend and I was like, what the actual, oh, he's not embodying anything he's talking about. But anyways, the point here is, yes, I do think a lot of them lead with the money. But then from what I've studied and seen in patterns, and then also from my experience, it's like, it's just like up front. It's like the love bombing phase. It's
Yeah.
love bombing, the compliments, the gifts, and then all fucking stops.
So I'm curious if this ever happened with the men who you had in your life who led with money,
Mm-hmm.
where they would start off generous, but then there was strings attached to it. So that if you weren't delivering
Yeah, always.
sexually, then that money tap gets turned off.
Always. I mean, I talked about this last weekend or 2 weekends ago, whatever it was, that I had so much um tied up with money and provision, not in my business, but with receiving from the masculine. So when we had to ask for something, I asked this group of dudes. I mean, you heard the story, but for the audience, I asked this group of dudes, like, will you buy me lunch? We had to get somebody to buy us something. And just request, and they like wanted to buy me alcohol, and I was like, no, I can't drink. They're like, why? And I'm like, why do you need us to buy you lunch? Do you not have like your wallet? Like, I'm like, can't actually disclose that, like, this is my request. And finally I was like, okay, it can be a no, but like, I do have a time limit. And so the dude I expected least to buy lunch for me um did, and they were I mean, they were like, well, we'll buy it if you drink with us. And I'm like, and so I didn't realize it was so hard for me to ask because I had so much. Yeah, it's like these energetic hooks and energetic contracts of like, okay, if they buy me dinner, they're expecting me to sleep with them. And um I think these were other red flags with my ex as well. It didn't happen early on, but later I noticed it.
Mhm.
Um and every other dude that I'd been with that had these energetics, like it was always like that. Even the ones who didn't really provide with money, it was like, and anytime they would buy me anything, whether it was a coffee or dinner, it was like it was like, okay, well, you have to sleep with me type of energy, or you owe me something.
Yes.
And that's not the sacred provision of or for the feminine, or for just like in in any regard. And it's interesting too, because I've had male friends, I feel safe receiving when it's platonic from men, more so than I did in relationship, because I didn't want them to think, well, now you owe me your body, if for me that was like too early, or so yes, it always had these ties. But there were certain men, and especially like my gay friends, like shout out to all y'all, who would like buy me dinner, and it felt, I was like, yeah, I get to just like receive and be in my feminine. And it was weird because I would be more in my feminine with them and more guarded with other guys. There was a couple, like, for sure, platonic friendships where it was, or just like, I'll give you an example. One of my dearest friends, like, she's in a partnership. She's been with this guy for like 6 years. He's amazing. Whenever we go out to dinner, like, most of the time he just grabs the bill, and it's not weird or awkward, and I feel so grateful and so provided for, but not in a weird like way where
Well,
now,
he's
oh
not expecting you to do sex stuff
yeah,
with him.
right, he's my best friend's partner. So like, it's in situations like that, it's been so healing, because it's like, oh, the masculine sometimes just wants to provide. But yes, to answer the question, very often it's always been a weird energy, and you can tell where it's like, I remember like when he gave me that watch, or when he would give me jewelry, I would feel weird for receiving it, and it was so subtle. And like, gifts are my love language. Like, I love gifts, and I have trauma around it from my parents. Love my parents, showed it to them. But um because they would always give my friends or our family friends like nicer gifts for like Christmas and birthdays, and I felt less than because of that. But it was from a place of like, no, you need to learn to like provide for yourself and earn things and blah blah blah, which I honor now with the wisdom I have. However, yeah, it's interesting because the energetic is so subtle, but we can feel it. We can feel it when somebody is giving with a vested interest.
So I am probably going to run out of time soon, and I really want to share this with you because I
Yeah.
feel like it's really maybe a nice one to end on, just
Yeah.
to speak to the big missing piece and the being an inch away from it, which I think is really what is the crux of the whole fuckboy experience for men.
Yeah.
So, having been with those women where they were being generous, they were in their feminine, they were doing all the right things that any man with half a brain who wasn't a misguided and lost individual like I was during those years would have probably said, this is somebody I could marry and be probably like happy with her.
Yeah.
The big hindsight that I want to share insight wise for any men who find themselves listening to this
Yeah.
and are questioning if they might be a fuckboy or if they know that they are and they're kind of like, I'm unredeemable, this is who I am, I how could I ever be forgiven? So it's that I couldn't receive that. I couldn't actually take what these women were giving me and sharing with me and have
Yeah.
it land in a way where it would bring us together in that very divine or meaningful way. So
Yeah.
in my ways of being and ways of manipulating and being deceptive, was literally cutting myself off from what it was that I wanted the most and that
Yeah.
would actually fill the hole that I thought I was going to need to go and be with all these other women and go in this escalating upward lifestyle and all of that shit. So that's the big lesson. That's the thing that
Yes.
I really want to leave with everyone, and the men especially, is that it isn't what we think it is. This whole Playboy lifestyle is
Yeah.
empty. And the
Yeah.
thing that will actually make you feel the way that you want to, and that sense of fulfillment and accomplishment, and that you've kind of gotten there,
Yeah.
it literally just from having intimacy, real intimacy, which comes from having, like, this is probably the equivalent of telling someone who's learning how to golf, like, oh, just hit the ball in the hole, just hit it straight and do it with as few strokes as possible. I realize that what I'm
Yeah.
saying right now, there's a lot to it, but to add just into the context of what we're discussing around the experience for you as a woman to be in this place that you feel like there's strings attached.
Yeah.
We chatted briefly on my marriage and the infidelity. So I've been married almost 14 years
Mhm.
and I wasn't faithful for the first 10 of them.
Yeah.
Even after quitting the cheating, and well, I guess I should say I'm an alcoholic. So I quit drinking in 2019
Yeah.
and things changed in a very positive way, which I think that needed to happen for me to quit lying and cheating.
Mhm.
But the one thing that didn't change until very recently was this sense of exchange, and where
Yeah.
it would be husbands doing duties. Okay, me as a husband doing these things where I'm contributing and I'm helping my wife and I'm buying her things and doing husband stuff,
Yeah.
but not really consciously realizing that in that I was setting up this expectation and she felt it and she knew it. And we've talked about this now. So it's been a really
Yeah.
great new chapter of our marriage that's just begun, where I didn't realize I was doing that. But I think this is another one that even for men who aren't fuckboys and who are happily, faithfully married, it's very easy to slip into this mindset of like, we all know that the female sexuality, sexual energy is like the most prized and valuable thing
Mhm.
that will ever exist.
Yeah.
So it's again this experience that I've had even up until recently where I couldn't truly feel intimate with that, even in a
Yeah.
committed, faithful marriage, because I was shut off to receiving. And
Yeah.
I literally, again, inch away, now a millimeter away, like I'd gotten
Yeah.
very close. And this is the, crazy kind of big epiphany that is unfolding for my wife and I now, which is
Yeah.
that in me forgiving myself and in me letting myself open up to actually receive from her,
Mm.
her and I both are having literally the best sex of our lives.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. And we're kind of like, fuck, this would have been amazing to have from the beginning of our marriage. But
Yeah.
we had to go down the path that we went down. And again, like, message for the fuck boys, or, people who are on the path to becoming a fuckboy out there, you will find your most fulfilling and happy moments in life as it concerns women when you actually connect on that deep emotional level. And there's no easy way to get there, and it's not without risk. Like,
Yeah.
so that's my message. That's my share. Um, I'm really grateful to have been on this with you, Jill. I've got 5 more minutes, so like any other questions, or how do we do the last bit here?
We'll close it up. I just want to say, like, it's so interesting because that's what that fear of intimacy was part of the reason that you were trying to get that from all these other women, and it was right in front of you the whole time. And that's what creates like sacred reciprocity, where you're not doing things like men aren't doing things just because like they have an expectation, but because they're honoring the feminine. And when we feel that as women, we want to give freely to you, whether it's our sexual energy, whether it's our devotion, whether it's cooking, whether it's doing chores, like whatever it is. That's what, where the feminine feels safe. She wants to nurture. And it's like everything you just said is so beautiful because it was in front of you the whole time. And it was, I think a lot of people are afraid of intimacy. A lot of people unconsciously have shadows running their life because they're not integrated, and they've been suppressing emotions, and they haven't had the resources to do the deep healing or the environment. The somatic work, in my experience, is the most powerful. And when we do, that's where we get the fruits of everything that we desire. And yeah, so I just want to say thank you so much for being on the podcast, for sharing your journey, for sharing tactics of a fuckboy, an ex fuckboy, and of sharing how, society might deem, okay, that's oh, like having all the girls and all, it's empty. It is empty. And when we're in those energetics, it is a dark place to
Yeah,
be.
it's a scam. It literally is one of the grand scams
Yeah.
of male culture and just male um, life, that so many
Yeah.
men think like this is how you're going to get to the next level or feel like you're this impressive and accomplished dude. And it really, I don't know if there are other examples of things that are as bad as that, like in terms of just the lack of cost benefit. Because the cost, like, let's be real here, I'm a middle-aged
Yeah.
guy who is lucky to even be married right now, and I've got a daughter who I had just met 6 months ago that's soon to be an adult. That's
Yeah.
a pretty big cost. I missed my little girl's life.
Yeah.
I've got children with my wife who, for the first years of their lives, I wasn't there. I mean, I was physically there, but I wasn't there emotionally. I wasn't there as the
Yeah.
dad that they needed. And for my wife, like, I will forever have so much gratitude and love for Lauren for being willing to roll the dice on me. And she's told me, she saw me for who I was. She knew the potential was there, and she believed in me even when I didn't. And I guess that's the other message to men, is that you might feel like you fucked up and that you've done things that you would be really ashamed or scared to admit to. But that is the key. Like, that's the first step, is actually allowing yourself to be forgiven by any of these women. Like, even with you, Jill, we didn't know each other. I wasn't the guy who had screwed you over, although I had
Yeah.
done it to many women who were
Yeah.
the archetype of you. And this worked. Like, you and I healed together in that
Yeah.
act of accountability and forgiveness. So I would put
Yeah.
it out there to any of the dudes watching that that opportunity is there for all of you. Like,
100%.
you can do it. You can, if you have the courage, you can
Yeah.
receive that forgiveness, and it will fucking set you free, and you will be on the path
100%.
to doing
Yeah.
this.
And like, I just want to acknowledge you because you did, yes, you had a huge cost. and you completely shifted your marriage and you shifted yourself and you took accountability, and you will be there for your children now. And you could have gone your whole life not. And a lot of people get so trapped in these cycles where they don't ever break free, and you did. And that is one of the hardest things and the most respectable things. So thank you for being an embodiment of that and showing people what is possible.
Thank you. Yeah, honored to have this opened up now.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess for any of your audience that has questions or wants to interact, like I welcome that. I don't know
Yeah.
if we'll do a follow-on Q&A thing or how
Oh,
that
yeah.
would work, but I assume there may be questions.
Okay, let's do it. We'll do a
Yeah,
Q&A.
so
I'll
okay.
make a link where they can submit questions once this is posted, and we can link your information if you want in the show notes. But yeah, I'd love to do a follow-up Q&A, and
Okay.
I'm sure there will be many questions.
Yeah, I'm here for it.
So much, and have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your night.
Okay, Jill, thanks again.
I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it was eye-opening to you. I hope it brings you greater levels of compassion and also inspires you to hold greater standards. I hope you heard the energetics of starting to initiate the masculine. This goes so much deeper. I mean, I could talk on this for hours and hours and hours and hours. But I said kind of the basics in here. Please send this to anybody who you think it would inspire, anybody who you think would benefit in any way, whether they are consistently calling in partners, either men or women, who are in the energy of manipulation or deceit or unfaithful or addicted to escorts or porn. I know we didn't get deep into that, but it is the same energetic. And they want to stop that pattern. As I said, this is what I help people do, one of the things, and we've had a radical success rate. So that's phenomenal. Very grateful for my journey, for giving me the tools and understandings to help other people as well. And also, anybody who is struggling with addiction of any sort, as I said, but specifically anybody who's struggling with porn addictions. I've helped a number of men out of this. Anybody who's struggling with, taking part in hiring escorts and have gone down that. I know it's a dark, dark path and they feel trapped and they're shame. This is when I help people through this, it is from such a place of non-judgment. I know what comes from a wound and I understand these energetics inside and out. Even men who are consistently calling in manipulative women, there is an imprint there that's making you a match to this. So if you would like support in this and to do the deep healing, the deep recoding, energetic work to become a match to true divine union, a true sacred relationship, I am here for you. Please email my team. We will send you an application. And if anybody has any questions, Brett has so kindly offered to come back on the show. We're actually in the works of something else really exciting to help support men through this in a more group setting. However, if anybody has, so stay tuned for that. If anybody has any questions or you're going through this on either side of it, men and women, please email my team and just ask your questions, because Brett has offered to come back and answer any, so we can answer those together from both of our understandings and perspectives. Mine, obviously, from a deeper energetic, spiritual, soul path view, and his from his personal experience, and also mine, obviously, from my personal experience, if you've heard my story. Okay. Love you, love you, love you. If this was useful for you, if you got value from this, please share on your social media and tag me. And also, we would so appreciate if you left a 5-star review. If you benefited from this, it takes literally 10 seconds and it helps us get this out to more people. I fund this whole podcast. I don't make money off the podcast. I don't have sponsors. I might at some point. However, that's not the intention. So it really allows this podcast to keep going because there's a lot of time, energy on the front end, on the back end, and it takes a lot of capacity, as well as paying my team, which I do out of my own pocket, to get these out to you, to get the reels out, to promote them, etc. So we would so appreciate if you shared this, on social media if it was profound, or with anybody you think could benefit, and if you would leave a 5-star review if you feel that is justified. And if you do, I have a free cord cutting activation and process that my team will send you. So all you have to do is take a screenshot of that 5-star review and send it to my team's email, which will link below, teamjillalannanixon@gmail.com, and we will get that to you. It's really powerful. It's encoded with high frequencies, and you're going to love it. So have a beautiful rest of your day, and we'll see you next week on the Soul Manifestation Podcast.